Today, my friends, we're doing a simplified review and breakdown for you of the Sony A7 IV. I've owned this camera now for a few months and I've used it quite a bit, so I'm confident in my findings rather than releasing something on day one and just reading from a spec sheet. So we're going to talk about the things that are awesome and the aspects where this camera does fall short as well. So if you're considering buying it, upgrading from the A7 III, or just want the knowledge, I'm going to do my best to give you everything that you need that might be relevant and not just a bunch of mumbo jumbo that really doesn't matter. So anyways, guys, the first thing that I absolutely love about this camera over the A7 III is the size, the feel, the shape, the ergonomics, and the button layout. It is just phenomenal. It actually fits in your hand now perfectly. It's a really, really good feeling camera. It's been upgraded in terms of weather sealing. It's just really solid and really great. And furthermore, the customization of this camera is absolutely phenomenal. There is an added dial instead of an exposure compensation dial. You can literally set this thing to whatever you want and dial that in, as well as lots of custom buttons and your other buttons as well. So customization is just next level. It's just phenomenal, and there's just so many options. And also, speaking of customization, I love the aspect of the different setting modes. You've got your photo mode, you've got your video mode, and you've got your S&Q mode on a dial here at the top. And that's gonna save your settings. So if you do, like me, go back from photo to video a lot, it's gonna save those settings, and everything from your function settings to everything just the way you left it when you switched off that mode is gonna be there and saved. So loving that. Saves a lot of time and a lot of missed shots and clips. So next up, one of my favorite features of this camera happens to be the ability to have the shutter come down to protect the sensor from dust. We asked for it and we got it, so very much welcomed. It's, yes, very fragile, but of course, this is gonna save you a ton of post editing if you're doing any kind of lens swaps and whatnot outside. So really happy to see this addition to the A7 IV. Yeah, thanks very much, Sony. Next, I'm really happy with the upgraded EVF and the LCD. The LCD is definitely nothing groundbreaking. It's a welcomed upgrade, but still really doesn't compare to a lot of things on the market today. So that's a bit of a drawback. I would have liked to see that a little bit higher in resolution, as Sony's really good at creating these things. So I don't know why in a camera that costs this much, we still have to have that kind of crummy LCD. But the EVF is fantastic. It's right where it needs to be and it looks great. So yeah, just another aspect where you don't have to worry about a crummy EVF anymore like the A7 III, which, yeah, you got away with, but this is much better. Next up, the controversial flip screen here. And yeah, you know what? I was used to it for so long and then I wasn't with the A7 III, and it took me about 12 seconds to get used to it again, and I'm loving it. I love to be able to see myself when I'm filming or if you're taking a selfie or something, and just to get some crazy angles if you're doing photography and you got your hand over a crowd or something. Well, it is very handy to have when you need it. So yes, I do like it. I know it's not for everybody, but it's a welcomed addition and does cover a lot of bases, especially if you plan on shooting video. And yes, this is a very capable video camera as well. Next, the menu system is much improved and I really like it. It's intuitive and easy to use, and it's finally touchscreen. So that was a feature that really needed to happen a long time ago. So I'm really happy that, that now it's included. It's still, yes, more complex than some other companies, but yeah, you know what? I'm taking it, and it's definitely better than the old version. So next, a big upgrade is the megapixels. The effective megapixels is up by about a third to 33 megapixels in this camera, and it doesn't come at a sacrifice of low light or dynamic range performance, which is amazing. So now you got some extra cropping power, you get some beautiful looking photos. I'm really loving the photos that I'm taking out of this camera. And yeah, just a little bit more resolution without going crazy up to 60 megapixels or something like the R series and having huge file sizes. It's a great compromise. And as far as dynamic range is concerned, I don't know how they've done it, but they've managed to basically improve on the dynamic range over the A7 III with more megapixels, which is a really hard thing to do. In some cases, they're kind of even, but I've seen some definite cases where the A7 IV is a better performing in low light and dynamic range. So again, close, but still a great performing sensor, and again, much welcomed. Okay, so if you are thinking about upgrading from the A7 III to the 4, the autofocus is alone one of the main reasons to do this. It is next generation and it is phenomenal. From eye autofocus in video, in stills, bird, animal, and human, and active tracking, of course. It is lightning fast and definitely hasn't let me down yet. So the autofocus is just insane, and I'm really impressed with it. Over the A7 III, it is a huge step up in terms of autofocus performance. Not that it wasn't capable, this thing is just on a different level in that case. Now let's talk about the image stabilization for a second. Yes, it does have image stabilization, and it has been further improved by adding active image stabilization, which is basically software. You do get a bit of a crop, but it's basically the same image stabilization from the Sony A7S III, and it is very good. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. It still has the old IBIS just alone, the mechanical version of that stabilization. But if you need it, as well as gyro data, you're covered. So if you do want to do some stabilizing in post, you have that option as well. So yes, in terms of stabilization, definitely a big upgrade. Like most Sony cameras these days, this thing now comes basically as a webcam, plug and play USB, you throw it on and you can use it as a webcam, and it looks fantastic. Anybody can figure it out. Literally, you just plug it in and it should pretty much connect and you're off and running. So really glad to see that happening. Don't need a capture card or anything like that these days. Fantastic addition. Okay, so let's talk about a sore subject for some people, and that's the shooting speed of this thing. It does shoot 10 frames per second, and that's uncompressed RAW, but honestly, you shouldn't be shooting in compressed RAW. There's basically no difference anyways, and I have to say that 10 frames per second has served me very well for years, and the average person definitely doesn't need more than that. After all, your autofocus system has to be on par with your shooting speed, so 10 frames per second mixed with this autofocus means you're gonna get some fantastic results. 10 frames per second is pretty quick. It's gonna mean anything faster is gonna use up your buffer a lot quicker. You're gonna be shooting more unnecessarily. So yeah, 10 frames per second, 12, 15 would have been nice if it could keep up, but there's always compromises. So again, 10 frames, do you really need more than 10 frames per second? Are you a crazy sports shooter? Are you a wildlife shooter professionally? Most people aren't, and they're gonna go maybe toward the A9 or the A1 for that. But this thing, as it stands, fantastic. And 10 frames per second, guys, I'm telling you, it's enough. So let's talk about the video aspects of this camera, and they are phenomenal. It has amazing video options, and honestly, a lot of people are questioning why they're buying the A7S III at this point. It is amazing when it comes to 4K. It shoots crispier and in a lot of cases looks even better than the Sony A7S III. No, it's not gonna have the low light performance, but as far as codecs and options for shooting, it's pretty much got everything you could ever want. It finally shoots in 10-bit 422. You've got, of course, your eye tracking in video, so it's very capable to keep up. And this camera even does focus breathing compensation, something that the A7S III doesn't even do yet. So for video, it's gonna be great to have that 10-bit, giving you a lot more flexibility. You do have that improved image stabilization as well, but it's gonna come at a crop. It's worth noting as well that when you're shooting in 4K 60, which it does include, there is a crop involved. So that does bug some shooters. For me, it's not a deal breaker at all whatsoever. It's a much welcome feature, but for some, keep in mind that there will be a crop, and if you're using active stabilization in your camera as well, you're gonna have a crop on a crop. So keep that in mind, but as far as video is concerned, very solid. I'm loving what I'm getting so far. I'm shooting on the A7 III right now, and just for comparison, guys, this is what the A7 IV looks like when we swap them out. And that's what the A7 IV looks like in comparison. Same lens, same settings, same everything, just swapped out the camera. So as you can see, pretty capable stuff, and I love the eye autofocus in video, man. I can't tell you how much of a big difference that is for shooting in here and stuff, especially when you're by yourself and whatnot. It's just really nice to have. So absolutely, this thing is amazing when it comes to video. There's guys out there doing insane stuff way over my head, but yeah, absolutely capable for my needs and lots of space to grow into. Okay, so let's touch base on a few things that kind of fall short to do with this camera, unfortunately. One is battery life. And yes, it does utilize the same exact battery as the A7 III, the awesome Z-type battery. And although it's still definitely better than most companies' battery life for their cameras, it is, yeah, significantly worse, I find, for video and for photos. So before, with the A7 III, I would go out all day and I wouldn't think twice about just bringing one battery. But now, yeah, it does eat it up quite a bit faster, so I am aware of my battery life and I'm trying to conserve it a little bit more. Yes, it can be fixed maybe or improved anyways in future firmware updates perhaps, but yes, it is more power hungry and it's got more tech and it's gonna use more battery, unfortunately. So a little bit of a sore topic for me, but definitely not a deal breaker, and again, still one of the industry's best. A downside for you video shooters is the 1080-120 aspect. If you want to shoot in slow-mo, for some reason you're capped at 8-bit. So a lot of people love that super, really slow-mo, and you like to shoot in 1080 for file sizes and whatnot. Yeah, you are limited to 8 bits. You're not gonna have the editing power that you do in 4K. So for me, it's really not that big of a deal. I'll just shoot in 4K 60 with a little crop, not a big deal. But for those of you that do shoot in 120 frames per second, do note that yes, you are capped at 8-bit. One important aspect I wanted to cover is this camera's ability to shoot with certain memory cards. It has been upgraded from the A7 III to include 2 UHS 2 card slots, which is going to be more than ideal for most shooters. For me, I chose to go with a really nice UHS 2, and I haven't had any issues. You have the option to go, of course, to the newer CF Express Type A cards, and I haven't done that yet for a few reasons. One, they're insanely expensive. Two, they're capped at around 160 gigabytes right now, and they're also really hard to find. Did I mention they're insanely expensive? Yes, over $500 for a 160 gigabyte one, and yeah, that's pricey. So the reason I haven't jumped on board to that is because for my needs, I haven't run out of any buffer. I get around 60 to 70 shots when I'm shooting 10 frames per second, and for 10-bit 422, I've had absolutely no problems whatsoever according to my memory card. I'm gonna do a full video here for you somewhere. I'll link it up there on this memory card, which one that I chose, and I've been so happy with it. I have heard some reports of people kind of running out of buffer around the 20 to 30 mark, but that's just not a very good memory card. So definitely check that out. That is a great option for you if you don't want to shell out for the crazy expensive CF Express Type A. But if you do, if money's not an issue and you don't really care about that size of card, you will have no buffer, like ever. Hundreds and hundreds of photos, which I don't know why you'd ever need to take that many photos. That's crazy for editing, for storage and whatnot, but yeah, you will pretty much not run out of buffer, and you're, again, safe for 4K or whatever kind of video you're recording as well. But you will burn through that 160 gigabyte if you're a video shooter shooting 10-bit pretty quickly. Now lastly, I wanted to touch base on a very important aspect to video shooters specifically, and that's the overheating issues with this camera. Does it actually overheat? The answer is yes. In fact, it literally just overheated as I record this video here in this room with the temperature at 18.4 degrees after about 14 minutes. Now there are some caveats here, and of course a lot of video cameras these days do overheat depending on the situations that you're in. Of course, if you're out on a blistering hot day shooting in 4K 10-bit, yes, it's going to generate some heat, but there are some things you can do to reduce power consumption and keep the temperature of your camera down. Now I actually have tried to overheat this camera and I've been successful in certain aspects, but I've also learned what not to do, and if you do follow these steps, the chances of your camera overheating are drastically reduced. I've shot for about 45 minutes straight at 4K 10-bit at about 20 degrees Celsius and haven't had an issue. So by default, the camera is actually set at a standard temperature regulation and basically is going to shut down more conservatively, opposed to if you put that setting on high, it's going to allow the temperature of the camera to rise a little bit more before shutting down for safety. And yeah, that is kind of weird that there is an option for that, but yeah, you can't get around it. This camera does utilize more power than say the A7 III, and as such, you need to account for that. So I did reach out to Sony about this, and they did advise a few things that you can do. First, because the camera does utilize more energy and create more heat in video and S&Q mode, they recommend sticking to photo mode until you're ready to shoot and switch over at that time. Yes, a little bit inconvenient, but not the end of the world. Next, you can turn off things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, anything that's going to generate more electricity from your camera, of course. If you've got everything on, of course, it's going to heat up faster, so limit the things that you don't need at the time. So if there's enough interest and you want, I will make a video on what to do to avoid this thing overheating. Just drop it down in the comments if that's something that you want to see. But other than that, guys, this camera has been just a fantastic upgrade. I think it's miles ahead of the A7 III in a lot of aspects. Is it the industry game changer that we saw when the A7 III was brought out? Well, not quite. A lot of other companies have some similar offerings, but for your bang for your buck, I think this is a fantastic option, and it's really served me well so far. It is definitely a great camera to grow into, giving you pro photo and video capabilities, and a great handling, great put together, and decently priced package. And yes, it is a bit more expensive than the Sony A7 III, but these days, what isn't? Thanks so much for watching, guys. If I missed something, or if there are things you want to know about this camera or anything that I do, make sure you drop down in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you do want to pick this thing up or any of the gear that I use, I will drop the affiliate links down in the description for you. Like always, guys, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you in the next one.